felt better that I didn't get deluged by phone calls. But then in the next couple of months, several people and many people, I did have another talk at Marianne and Joey's, and that was very emotional and so on. And I didn't deal too much with too many things. And I can recall vaguely, very ambiguously, coming in and saying, I don't know if I'll be able to talk about recent events. And I know that's on your mind, but just bear with me. We'll talk about other things and I'll see if I can get into it. And of course, it was close enough time that the people that were to eventually die, several of them were in the hospital and still alive. In other words, they were dying of burns and smoke inhalation and things like that, in comas. And I was very, very aware of those people. So to say anything at all until, how dare I say something like the final count be made.
Right.
And then I was also very, very in tune with and attached to, and I'll say incorrectly so, overly attached to, people, individuals who survived. I'm trying hard to say it.
But have to go through a great deal of pain in the process.
I guess what I was really trying to say might be for another conversation. But if you are really aware of something in the future, you or anybody, I mean, clairvoyantly aware or spiritually aware, there are sometimes opportunities to, in one way or another, and judgmentally facilitate something as a love gesture. In other words, can we love the families of people who experience trauma or tragedy or the loneliness of bereavement, of death? Well, yes, we can. Excuse me. Can I, in Rochester, New York, spiritually or psychically hug somebody who is in a plane crash right now and make their life a little bit better, or they're passing on to death, what we call death, make their passing a little easier? In other words, does anybody have the ability to spiritually hug somebody and say, you are in the process of dying, but I want to tell you that you're not alone and it's okay? And the answer is yes. Not only yes, have I ever done that, and have I gotten a great deal of joy from doing that, but I mean, anybody can do that. Though it's in your state of fervent prayer, if you're not psychic or you don't have any major thing to claim towards psychic abilities and this, that, you can psychically or spiritually hug people that are far, far away from you, that you don't even know personally. You've never met, you never will meet. You have the ability to do that, and it makes the world go around a little easier. Well, now that I've gotten that out, I'm kind of proud of what I just said. Some of that took place.
I know recently when we were beginning to tape before, the movie was being talked about that depicts this whole incident called Fire and Rain.
Yeah, that was the
People
title.
had the opportunity to see that. You said they handled everything quite accurately as far as the detail.
Yeah, I know that they had taken for sure the dialogue off the flight recorders, because in that particular movie, which we saw part of just a few minutes ago, some of the minor discrepancies that made it more comfortable for me to watch the movie. You can imagine how I would watch that movie compared to anybody else. And even if I dare say a family member of somebody who died on that plane crash, they certainly watched that movie also. And whereas it may have been traumatic for them to watch the movie, I'm not trying to brag or build myself up or anything, but bear with me if I say I watched that movie probably different than almost anybody else. I didn't just watch it as a good mechanic who knows the eloquent flying ability of an L-1011, but how many passengers were aware of that extraordinary piece of machinery that was destroyed? How many people could understand that death is a good thing, not a bad thing? How many people can have a spouse or a very close relative die and just smile and comfortably know that my father is okay and that there will be no bereavement? How many people can do that? I mean, accurately, I mean, truly do that. Some people can be very intellectual and callous and block and various other things, but the combination of things that I experienced through that plane crash and ongoing, I have to say is weird. In other words, the combination of things. Can I see it as a spiritual person who wants to hug everybody? Yes, I can. Can I be emotionally directly involved and attached to the individuals in that plane crash? I was. So watching that movie was a good thing for me, and it didn't amount to, in other words, it didn't really change me at all. But the part that made it more comfortable was for me to view it with the attitude of looking for discrepancies. In other words, looking for things that were not accurate, such as when the dialogue, when they portrayed the plane crashing, and the computer itself has a voice, and it says, pull up. In other words, in the movie, you can hear the computer stating mechanically, pull up, and that continues right out through the crash. That was accurate enough, and that was the type of voice that, in reality, that in the real event sounded like that. But at the same time, there were two bells, a dinging bell and then a steady ringing bell, which was not portrayed at all, which was on the voice recorders in the real event. Now, see, I know that. The investigators, I'm sure, will have known that because they will have listened directly to the tapes. But in the movie, it made it not real.
Yeah.
So it was a little more comfortable for me to view that. Also, for instance, the portrayal of, some of the characters that they portrayed. You know that they were portraying a particular person in the event, such as the wife of the mechanic that was killed in the car. And also, like the portrayal of the crashed car did not look anything like the car that was left on the expressway that day. And also,
some of the characters were a composite of any person.
Yeah, some of the women that were passengers that were saying that they were fearful of flying and that they know they're not going to make it and that the plane is going to crash ahead of time. That was a composite of several people's attitude focused in onto what I'm also sure is one particular woman who I won't mention who survived the crash and was publicized because very quickly she publicly said what it was like. And let's see. I was going to say some of the things that she said, but I guess maybe I shouldn't. For instance, how did she possibly get out of the seat that she was hanging from? Meaning she was at an angle almost upside down, and that there was no way for her to unbuckle her seatbelt, and that she stated that the horrendous amount of assistance that was given, the medical rescuers and so on, and that her attitude was calmed down by spirit, and these are her exact words, by spiritually knowing that people cared and people were helping. What else?
I think you probably answered this question, but I think to make it apply in people's lives who are watching the video, what do we do when we receive information that that are sort of precognitive nature.
Yeah.
How much responsibility do we have to try, we can't really change what is, but I know in this particular instance you certainly wish to could have.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, again, to kind of reiterate or say again, what Tom Sawyer did wrong during those months prior to that is I took upon myself knowing, first of all, there's knowing, the word K-N-O-W. I knew that had to take place. There was spiritual information told me this will take place, and that plane has to crash on this date and in these general circumstances. The wind shear, which was the mechanical fault, other judgmental things that I know for myself, and me being judgmental, I blame on the crash, which is different than the official decision. And it's because of additional pieces of information that I have that I could never share with the investigators. And for what purpose?
Right.
Notice, do we want to point the finger at him or her or him? That doesn't matter. Notice the event took place, and mechanically they see that the Doppler effect radar, the wind shear devices should be at the end of runways. We have them in existence. We have the technology. If this were in place, it would have demanded the pilot to go around. The pilot would not have been given part of the responsibility of making that type of a decision. God forbid he should make an incorrect decision. There's implications there, and that doesn't help society. So, to alleviate the pilot of as many decisions as possible, and to mechanically, in other words, instrumentally demand that, like a red alert and pull up before they enter the wind shear. So things like that is what is important after the fact. As far as what I did wrong, like taking on the responsibility of knowing that it has to take place, but within myself, I decided I know too much about this and this is too important. And even the arrogant attitude, Tom Sawyer, don't want the safest airplane in the air to crash. I mean, to me, that's not justifiable. In other words, don't ever hesitate getting on a Lockheed L-1011. I mean, they are, in my opinion, the safest commercial jumbo jet in the air. Equal in every way to a 747. I better not say too many planes. You and I might be on one of the on one of the lesser of the safest airplanes in the near future. So we will not talk about DC-10s.
So we'll just rattle and roll to our destination.
Yes.
Safely.
But anyway, what I was saying was to take on the responsibility of deciding that I don't care what I know, spiritually speaking, I'm going to see if I can find this airport. I'm going to see if I can find out when it happens. And if and when I find out exactly when it happens, the probability, what I'm trying to tell you, the probability is that I'll do something to divert that flight, stop that flight, make a phone call, which I've never done before. In other words, with the information that this has to take place, we as responsible individuals, usually information comes spiritually also, that this is how much you can do, here are some alternatives, and that's it. In other words, you know enough. In this, I took it upon myself to try to override and do a one-upsmanship to the spiritual flow of destiny. I don't know if you understand that sense, and that was incorrect of me, and therefore I paid the price. I took on some responsibilities that I have in my history now, my spiritual history at least, that I'll have to deal with in my next life review, that I'll have to deal with when I become totally spiritual and no longer have the psychology and emotions of the humanistic part of Tom Sawyer that is here right now. And I will pay the price. I'm not saying that I'll be punished or so on and so on, but that will have to be dealt with. And if there is a price to pay, like any kind of extraordinary amounts of spiritual energy that I manipulated, well, then I'll have to conserve that. I'll have to pay the price of the law of conservation, spiritually speaking. And I'm prepared to do that. I'm aware of a great deal of that right now, and I'm prepared to pay that price. I decided to do that. But we, you, and everybody else have to be very, very careful. The caution here is be very careful as to how much you take on. The casual attitude to say, well, wait a minute. If you know a plane is going to crash, you owe it to society to stop it. And that's ridiculous. It's ridiculous because if it's something that has to be, well, maybe your part in it is just to further your education. Or, bear with me if I say this, to prepare you personally for another event similar. Or, how am I able to go and get the lost little girl and be callous enough to deal with certain aspects of it? Will I be a better mechanic knowing that it's very important to have things correct? Will I be more compassionate having dealt with the very real humanistic emotions of the people involved in that plane crash? And will I be able to be more compassionate toward my family, toward you? And the answer is yes to all of that. So again, the justification of having knowledge like this or having gone through something like what I've described in its entirety, there are many, many aspects that justify it all. In other words, was it an opportunity for me to test myself? In other words, how arrogant or how righteous can I get? And can I be so righteous in my mind that I can override spiritual knowledge and misuse or manipulate spiritual knowledge? The answer to that is yes. I mean, those the opportunities are there, the ability is there. Now, as to what I ever finally do or don't do, it's partially up to me and partially up to spiritual matters that are manipulated from the other side, and it's by the light or by God. What was the other part of that statement? Because you actually asked a question for him. You said, "What can we learn
what
from
should
this?"
other people feel they should do in terms of if they get precognitive information, and what responsibility do they have to act on?
All right. If any of you or if I get a precognition of any nature, any kind, there are different types. There's the types where you get the knowledge and you know that you have to know it and that's it. That pretty much sizes it all up because no matter what you do, striving or trying to change or alter or become overly involved or not, or totally shunning it totally, you just won't do it because it's predestined. This is information that you have to know. You may not have an explanation. You may not have any kind of rationale regarding it, but that's it. So that covers that. And there's not much else to say about that. Some are wonderful, some are tragic, some you simply have to know about it. And tough. Shrug of the shoulders. That's part of life, if you will. Okay, but then there are other types where you can know of a future event that is changeable. Now, the most horrendous in this part of the century, practically, if I can claim that, because I wasn't alone. I don't have to claim this for a Tom Sawyer thing. I was part of it on a global scale, as a matter of fact. The nuclear detonation, which was zeroed right in on. In fact, I think the closest I came to was saying by August 15th, meaning no sooner than July, but no later than August 15th of 1988. And I mean, that was very accurate. That was also 100% real. It was no figment of anybody's imagination. This was global in scale. There were several other people who had this for more than 10 years of precognition. I don't mean, I think by the end of the century there'll be a nuclear detonation. No, that's either fakery or such low-level psychic awareness that the probability of a earthquake or the probability of a nuclear detonation before the turn of the century, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about if you have genuine precognition of factual nature to one degree or another. As we all dealt with that, or a majority of the people dealt with that, even my shared knowledge talking to you or people like the people that will be viewing this tape, that I have knowledge and I want to share it with you. And I told you that even though I'm fair and I say there will be the highest of probability, I knew that it would be if things were allowed to go as they were. The alternative was, which was information given to me spiritually, was that if I can change some of my attitude, if the world in general, the populace of the world would change their attitude alone. In other words, an attitudinal change more toward love than material and hatred and righteousness and vendettas and all those things that are handicaps for us in the long run. At least in the long run, they're tragedies, they're handicaps. You may justify them at the moment, but they're not going to be justified in your life review. You may say, well, you hit me, I had to hit you back, and I was justified. In the eyes of the law, it's okay, I'm vindicated. Yeah? Wait till the life review. Or wait till 2 months from now when you find you have to be with that person, either in a business relationship, or you might need the assistance or help of that person that you righteously got the better of. I mean, it's a wonderful thing that the person you shake your fist at and scream and yell in the traffic jam, knowing that you'll never see that person, turns out to be your boss in the near future, or it turns out to be your next door neighbor. I mean, that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. There are many things we could do. You have to deal with it very carefully. You have to deal with it intelligently. One of the things you have to be careful of is don't run right out and start bragging. That's something that's delightful. It's fun. And I'm being honest. I mean, some of the things that I brag about, I brag and it's fun and hey, wow. And there's no denying that. The sensationalism involved in that, you have to be careful to not feed on that. I mean, there's many examples that I've given before of one individual who became clinically or practically clinically dead only because of the sensationalism and the greed, therefore, the greed of the sensationalism. And he, a good friend of mine, almost died only from the greed and then the ego that feeds off of the greed. Goes to the sensationalism of feeding off your greed gains ego. You may become egotistical or that spiritual ego that is not healthy, and it can kill you. It can physically kill you, it can disrupt you, to say the least. And Mark Evans is a perfect example of that, almost the ultimate example of that. And he's doing okay now, having gone through that.
He was in a coma, was he?
Yes, he was in a hospital bed dying. The doctors threw up their arms and said, there is nothing wrong with this man, and he's dying. And one thing led to another, and with assistance from a lot of people, which I was kind of directly involved in.
Having to do with him having precognitions that he couldn't handle.
Well, see, that's not true to state that way.
Yeah.
He had many, many precognitions, and he could have handled all of them.
Uh-huh.
But he sensationalized the sensationalist aspect of them, and he even sold. In other words, you come to my house, and for $5, I'll share with you some future events. And even though that can be done for some people in a certain way, because I'm not criticizing and condemning people who give readings, futuristic readings, okay? I'm not condemning that. It's not the same thing I'm talking about. And I'm saying that if you are balanced, and I like to point to, your heart chakra and so on, if you're balanced in that and using that as a justifiable or a righteous facilitation to assist and love people, even if it's done for an income, if you have to do that for an income, I'm not judging that either. I'm not talking about that same thing. I'm talking about that which I did with the plane crash, that Mark Evans did with many precognitions of all different natures. And he sensationalized that, and it devastated him. I mean, he lost his security in his family, he lost his finances, he lost practically everything. And he had to, quote unquote, start all over again. And he's doing okay now, God bless him. I mean, and he's where he should be right now in view of his acts of free will. Be careful of your acts of free will and what they're based on. Be very careful because, for instance, you can say, this is such extraordinary information, you should know about this. I mean, I know things right now that I want to share with you, and you would do well to know it. But where do you draw the line? And I right now have to draw the line that I'm not going to share with you a few things that I know. Excuse me. In other words, judging everything. So many things are a trade-off. If I become a psychic, I become a well-known psychic, there's a trade-off. My phone is going to be ringing for the types of phone calls that I shouldn't be bothered with.
Right.
They're of no value to me, and in the long run, they'll be of little or no value to the person calling.
Right.
Are you the one in the Inquirer magazine? Click. And that did a lot of good for the caller.
Yeah.
Did it do any good for me? Yeah. Rang my phone, interrupted me, and I had to say, oh, there's somebody else sensationalizing that they saw my picture, my name in the Inquirer magazine. Those things, be careful of that. You say, I'd like to be a movie star. Whoa, movie stars sometimes work 16 hours a day, 20 hours a day, and they're very lonely at times. I mean, you think it's take for granted. You go to the shopping center, you walk around and buy a new pair of shoes. If you're very famous, you can't do that. You can't do that comfortably. I mean, look, the little bit that I've been public, and because I've been very choosy and so on, I've been in restaurants and have people come and interrupt Elaine in my dinner and saying, I'm the 99% of the people, and I can't complain about that because it's been done in good taste. And both Elaine and I, or especially me, have never been devastated by my popularity, my fame. I mean, the dictionary definition of famous was if you're well known, why are you well known and what does that mean?
Right.
I've been prepared for that, and I've taken that. I've coped with that very well. So regarding anything that you might be dealing with, think of those things ahead of time. And I mean, think them all the way through.
What you really want and what does it really mean when you get it.
And you can deceive yourself into saying, oh no, I'm doing this as a love gesture, when you're really building your own ego. As I want to be known as a hugger, therefore I hug. That isn't the right motivation. That's not correct. It's okay if you're known as a hugger or not. And that you should want to hug somebody spontaneously because the opportunity is there and you will feel good making them feel good, and you know that they will feel good receiving that from you.